you ever think you could learn something from a monkey? In many countries of the world, they catch monkeys with a very simple procedure. They get something like a coconut, they drill a hole in it. The hole is big enough for the monkey's hand to reach in. They put a tasty morsel of food inside the coconut, fasten it to a tree, and the monkey comes along and puts his hand in and grabs the food. But here's the problem. Because the monkey has made a fist around the food, when it goes to pull out its hand, it's stuck. It can't get out. And the monkey remains there until its captors arrive. Here's the crazy thing. The monkey isn't actually physically trapped. He's not trapped by a barrier, but by an idea. You see, the monkey just has to let go of the food, and it can be free. But it does not. Because the monkey has learned through its life that holding on to food is a good thing to do. And generally, if you're a monkey, that is a good thing to do until it's not. In the gospel this weekend, Jesus said something very extraordinary. He said, if you wish to become my disciple, you must pick up your cross and follow me. If you wish to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. This idea of taking up one's cross, it's a phrase that's very familiar to us. The image of the cross is familiar to us. We wear it around our necks. It's a symbol of hope, of life, of love even. But remember, Jesus first spoke these words before his crucifixion and the resurrection. And to his contemporaries, the cross, that was an execution instrument used by the hated Romans. It struck fear and dread into people, and it would be a very odd thing indeed to be wearing around your neck. Imagine today someone walking around with a hangman's noose around his or her neck. That would be pretty weird. And so we've sometimes forgotten the original impact of the image of the cross. As well, this idea of pick up your cross and follow me. In our spirituality, we've likened that expression to mean, put up with the hardships of life, with the difficulties, with the suffering that's unavoidable. Offer it up. Pick up your cross. But once again, this is not the real original meaning of what Jesus would have said. In fact, his listeners would have heard his invitation as simply this: come and die. If you wish to be my disciple, you've got to come and die. There's a dying process that you must engage in. Jesus used this image often in his teachings. He talked about the seed that needed to fall into the ground and die, otherwise it would not bear fruit. He spoke about his own life and ministry in this way as well. If we reflect on our human lives in general, in our own personal growth, in our relationships, we see that there's truth here, this idea of dying to ourselves. We know that a key part of maturing is to die to our, giving ourselves immediate gratification. You got to delay the gratification. That's the difference between an adult and a child. To be mature means we have to die to our own selfish inclinations, sometimes our own selfish needs, wants, and hopes and desires. We also know that for a relationship to truly flourish and be healthy, we have to die to that selfishness within each of us that makes it all about us. I mean, think of any successful marriage is a place where people have to come and die, because if you don't, it's the marriage that actually dies. And the same thing applies to the spiritual life as well, as we seek to die to that reality called sin, the things that lead us away from God. This is true of us personally, relationally. It's also true of us corporately as a church and as a parish. The truth is this, that if we don't actively embrace the death that leads to life, the death that does not lead to life will embrace us. Now, what does that mean for us as a parish? I don't know. I don't know with detail. I don't know with certainty all that it's going to mean, but I do hope that in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to be able to journey to discover that together. I might not know every detail, but I do know this, that it does mean that we must move beyond the status quo. It does mean that we can't simply go back to the way things were. It does mean that we are going to embrace change in some way, and change is always painful. It always involves dying in some way, because the truth is we may desire the fruit of change, but we want to avoid the pain of change. One thought that's occurred to me in the last number of weeks, I have been your pastor now for 4 weeks, and I've had the grace to come into the new parish, Our Lady of Guadalupe, as coming in and looking at the entire parish as one. And at the same time, I've had the grace to go and celebrate the Eucharist in each of the 4 locations, and to meet people who identify primarily with a particular location. I've learned about the history of that place, got to know the people in those places and their own hopes and dreams for the future. Here's an observation that might be a little bit controversial. The 3 parishes, the 3 smaller parishes, are locations. So our Immaculate Conception Church, St. Paul's, and St. Anthony's. The people who traditionally went to those locations actually comprise only 1/3 of the entire parish. 1/3. So the 3 small parishes, previous parishes together, make up 1/3 of the new parish. But the people in those smaller communities are very familiar with this experience of dying, with this experience of sacrifice in some ways. More so perhaps than the people at St. Peter's Parish. Think about it. The people in these smaller parishes have lost a priest, a resident priest, a number of years ago. In the last year, they've seen the closure of their parish office. In the last month since the pandemic, they no longer have Sunday Mass at their parish. And for the last number of years, they've been living under the shadow of the question of, will our buildings even be closed down? Whereas for the folks at St. Peter's, I think for the most part, there's been a sense that we haven't really had to feel much of the loss. The building is the biggest building, and perhaps we presume that it's simply always going to be there. The parish office is still in that location. You still have your priest. Heck, we've even got the same Mass times. They haven't even changed. And so there's been relatively little impact of the whole thing. And I think because of this reality, sometimes we've unintentionally communicated, the larger group of the parish has unintentionally communicated to the smaller communities in the parish that, the real answer to all of this change is, well, you just simply have to close down and come and be absorbed into us. But I don't think this is what God is calling us to do. How do we know what God is calling us to do? I think the key is found in the second reading from this weekend's Mass. St. Paul writes his letter to the Romans, and he talks about how we can know the will of God. And he says this: we know the will of God through authentic worship. He says, by offering yourself as a living sacrifice. He says, this is your spiritual worship. You offer yourself as a living sacrifice. This is holy and acceptable to God, he says, your spiritual worship. And in doing this, you will know the will of God. You will know what to do. Because it's when we offer ourselves as living sacrifices, he says, that we will refrain from being conformed to the world. We won't be conformed to worldly ways of thinking, but rather we will be transformed, he says, by the renewing of our minds. See, to do and to discern the will of God, we need to be transformed and have our minds renewed. We need to stop being conformed to worldly ways of thinking, and at the heart of all of it is to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice. Now, think about that for a second. To offer ourselves as a living sacrifice is nothing less than to accept the invitation of Jesus to come and die. I mean, every time we gather at Mass, we gather around an altar, and in every world religion, altars are used for one thing and one thing only, and that's to kill things on, to offer sacrifice. This is what's been asked of us, that we literally put everything on the altar, that we lay everything on the table. And that invitation to authentic worship, to offer ourselves as living sacrifices, to come and die, is not just extended to 1/3 of our parish. It's to all of us. And only when all of us, every member of our parish, accepts this invitation, will we truly be able to discern the will of God for the future of our parish. So, in previous weeks, I've given you some homework. Here's the homework for this week. Remember the monkey? What are you holding on to? What is it that you need to let go? What is it that we need to let go? Where do we need to find freedom? Is it an idea, even like the monkey? Is it a set of presumptions? Whatever it is, let's pray this week for the grace to receive that insight and the freedom to let go so that we may be truly free and that we may discern the will of God and move together as one parish into the future. God bless you.